I'm Tanya Fox, and you're listening to Fox Talks Business Podcast. I started my career in the corporate world, but always played to my own tune and loved to think outside of the box. This didn't always serve me well with the bosses, so I made the decision to become an entrepreneur. And that little seed of entrepreneurial curiosity continued to grow as I branched out into retail, service, and franchise businesses. Now, I have been fortunate to have amazing successes in the last 2 decades, but they did not come without some really big failures and even bigger lessons learned. And that's why I started this podcast, not just to share the failures, but to show you how you can turn every failure into a success. We're going to hear from some amazing humans from around the world that are going to share their stories of the good, the bad, and the motivational entrepreneurial life has to offer. After all, life is too short to make all of the mistakes yourself, so why not learn from each other? And of course, we're going to have some fun, because as I always say, well, you know what? I'll tell you that at the end of the episode. Hello, Foxy listeners. Welcome to the show today. We're going to be talking about talking, which is a favorite topic of mine, but I brought an expert to help on the edge of it. So I would love to introduce you to my guest, Aleya, today. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I also love talking and talking about talking. So I feel like I'm in the exact right place.
So you have a little bit of an interesting history because this isn't where you sort of decided you were going to start from. Tell us a little bit about sort of where you started from and how your journey got you to now being what you are today.
Absolutely. And I'll try to do a little bit of a shorter version because this could be like the whole podcast. So I started off in the fashion and cosmetics industry. Hated it. I was in the corporate offices and I just didn't understand like why these $400 jeans that made my butt look flat and cost $20 to make were selling like hotcakes. And I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Luckily, when I got to the cosmetics side, I was laid off, so I didn't have to get it. The universe stopped expecting me to try to get it. And when I was laid off, I tried to do everything, get a job doing everything from administrative assistant to manager to coordinator to the things. And this is like before Uber was like a thing.
Right.
So your girl was just broke. And so one day, one of my friends was ever at my house and she said, you should just go to culinary school. She made this decision because she was over at my house, the one that was unemployed, my house eating my food.
As good friends are.
As good friends are. And she decided that, hey, you know what? You should go and have this experience. And I said, you know what? I'm not doing anything else. And actually, my big project was scrapbooking at the time.
Yeah.
Which I will tell you, if you're broke, don't pick up scrapbooking because it's an expensive hobby. Like
I
all
would
the
say
things.
any crafting, because I used to own a craft store. So I'm like, if you're
Goodness.
broke, that is the worst hobby to get into.
Worse. Go choose like sourdough bread making instead. Like something that, I mean, however, that can get really pricey too. I digress. So I did go to culinary school. I did. I was there for 2 years and I graduated with honors. But while I was in culinary school, I got the best piece of advice I'd ever gotten, which is from a very grumpy chef instructor who clearly needed to either retire or go find something else to do with their lives. Said to me, well, you're not going to amount to anything. You're going to have to basically work for $10 an hour for 10 years before you're able to see any type of traction in this industry. And I'm like, I'm sorry. Have we met? Because that's not how I operate. I was lucky where my very first internship was through a program called Inroads, and they placed me at Visa and then at Levi's every summer in college. And I made $20 an hour there. So I wasn't going to go down to making $10 an hour when I started off at a pretty good clip, right? And so I said, watch me. So I started a catering business while I was in school. And it was called Culinary Princess Catering. Of course it was.
I love it. I love that though.
I love that for then me. I would never now, but you know what? Then me had a whole bunch more sparkle, I think. And when I started it, I was catering, I did weddings, I did a lot of meal prep and planning, and then I got an agent, as one does in Los Angeles, because everyone has an agent for everything. So there is actually, yes, an agent for private chef work. So then I really went more into the private chef world. I was Stevie Wonder's private chef. I traveled all over the world with him. I was stars of screen and music, and it was great until I realized that I was part of somebody's entourage. I was
Right.
part of their empire. I couldn't really build my own when I was part of theirs. And because I was good at what I do, they didn't really want me to no longer be part of their empire. So there was no like, oh, let's promote you as your separate thing, or let
Yeah.
you
Let's
know
help you
be in.
outgrow
Yeah,
us. Yeah.
yeah, no, there was no outgrowing. And I said, this is not working for me. So I then applied online, and I ended up getting a gig at Google as a vendor partner on their food team, but on the marketing side. So their food, all of their food's internal, and I was marketing, and I was the regional marketing manager, with my region being the United States. And then I ended up moving up in my parent company and being the head of marketing for North America. And then I got laid off for the second time. This is February 2020. And at the time, I I had just bought a new Mercedes, so I wasn't super excited about the timing. I wasn't, if we're honest. But I was excited to be out of there because it was a lot of like bald men in blue suits, and I was pink lipsticked and big hair, and it just was not the best mix for me. I didn't feel like I could be myself. And that was when I started my journey. I didn't know I had started it, but that was when I had started my journey towards figuring out what authenticity really felt like to me, and showing up in a way that really made sense. And I had been pulling up until that point on the lessons I had gained from being in somebody else's entourage or working in fashion and cosmetics. And all of that requires you to assimilate. And those were the top line messages that I was being told and telling myself. Even at Google, you felt like you had to assimilate because everyone there, even the smartest people, feel like imposters because there's so many smart people there, right?
Right.
So you're like, oh, well, I must be the one that like someone's going to figure out that I am not supposed to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't know
and
anything that you just said, but I am not in with the rest of
anything
them.
exactly, exactly. And so when you're on that level and you've been so focused on fitting in and kind of or being better than but still in the same bucket as somebody else, it's actually a very difficult transition to figure out who you are and what you should be doing from there. But once I realized that that was kind of the main note of the song, but there were other notes in the song I could pull on, I decided that I would go and have a little bit of an exploration of what I could do on my own. The other notes were like the fact that no matter what I had done, I had found a way to love other people through food, through marketing, through mentorship. I had found a way to help people find themselves within their own journey. And it just happens naturally. I will do it over some apples in a grocery store, right? It has happened before where we have these conversations. People are gravitating towards me when they feel like there's a lack of clarity, or they feel like they're not as in touch with a specific vibrant energy that they're looking for, and they tend to find me. And so I said, well, I wonder what that's like. And I didn't really put much thought into it at the time because I didn't really understand it like I do now. But I did start off in entrepreneurship. And it became abundantly clear that the energy that I had was what was going to carry me through. Because every time that I got on a stage, virtual or in person, every time that I spoke on a podcast, every time I had someone in front of my face, I made money. And so I said, well, why is that? So I started asking, and they're like, well, the answer that everybody gives me whenever I get off stage is, oh, I love your energy. I just love your energy.
Yeah.
I love it. And I thought that it was my energy as Aleya Harris, and I was just, right? No, that's not it. just in case you're wondering, that's actually not what's happening. What is happening, I realized the hard way when I was in the bowels of postpartum depression. I had pretty severe postpartum depression for about 11 months after I had my baby, who's turning 2 tomorrow at the time of this
Aw.
recording. Yes, she's so cute. So cute. Anywho, I digress. I was in my hotel room, bawling my eyes out in like probably like half pajama, half bra situation. I was like, I gotta get myself together. So I did, got myself together, put the face on, put the pretty dress on, fluffed the hair up as big as it could be, and I strutted down to the conference room and I gave my presentation. When I got off that stage, everyone still said, "Oh my God, I love your energy." And I was like, wait a minute.
What
Because
energy?
what energy? What exactly are you talking about? What are you seeing? And then that's what really got me even more questioning, well, what am I putting out? And they're like, well, you're so authentic and you're just this vibrant and blah, 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 blah. And I felt none of those things. I felt like I was being a fraud on that stage because I had to like fake it. Like I was not feeling great. I felt like I was no energy. I felt like I was like, oh my God, I bombed that. And then that conference, because that presentation actually won Speaker of the Year, right? Like WTF,
Yeah.
like WTF. And I realized that it was because I had no other option at that moment besides channeling. So the way that I teach people to speak is there is a radically authentic part of you. I call it your radically authentic self, the part that knows, the part that is omnipresent, the part that is connected to any and all things inside of you. And if you can tap into that and just kind of really just open your mouth and allow words to come out from that spot of you, you will connect with your audience every single time.
Yeah.
It takes the burden off your shoulder to always be right and strong and powerful and all this stuff because you just connect. So I told you that this was going to be short there, Tanya. And I realized that I just kind of kept talking. Would you like to say something? Because I could keep
No, and I think
going.
this is great because I think so often, I remember early in my speaking career that I would very much curate every single word that was going to come out of my mouth. And I would stand in front of a mirror and I would practice and I would know the words. And, if there was a glitch, this is where I'd stop. This is where I pause. This is where I take a breath. And it was, it was
It was
exhausting.
exhausting.
And
And you probably sounded like a well polished robot.
I would get off stage and it would take me like 2, 3 days to recover from like being at a conference or something because it was just like, it was all of this prep. And I remember being in a grocery store and I remember seeing this old lady and I'll never forget it. I was standing in a Walmart
So
and
much happens in grocery stores.
so much. Like people come to me and I'm like, I always say to my husband, don't leave me alone. Because then he comes back like 10 minutes later and he was like, who was that? And I'm like, Cecile, her husband has cancer. Like I have her whole entire life story. And he's like, it was 5 minutes. I'm like, I just looked at her and smiled. I didn't even utter a word. Like, I don't know, but she needed it. Here I am. So, but I remember seeing this blue hair, like literal blue haired old lady, and she was looking at the cashier. And this cashier she must have been maybe 20, 21, really tall, very, very skinny, like almost way too skinny. And she
Mm.
had like tattoos all over her face and piercings and the big earrings and all of that other stuff. And this old lady's looking at her and I'm like, she's going to say something. God bless her. She's going to say something like, and I just like beelined it for that line, right? Because I'm like, this is just
Just so you
a
could
show.
catch the drama.
This is a show I want to watch. But I remember standing there and she's looking, and the girl's like, can I help you with something? And this sweet little old lady who wasn't so sweet, she's me older, I swear. That's why she was placed there. Looks at her, waves her hand in front of like her face and is like, who hurt you? Who hurt you? And like went around the counter and hugged her. And I was just like, and the girl is just standing there like, I don't
Catch
know what
kid
to do.
moment.
Right. And in the moment, I was like, oh my God. So I caught up with her in the parking lot and I was like, that was amazing. And she goes, you know what? I wish I would have learned it when I was younger. I like to be just as surprised as everybody else for what comes out of my mouth. Just stopped guarding myself. And it's so freeing. And I've yet to hurt somebody. And I thought, holy crap. Like that was my aha moment that I realized I was not being my authentic self because I was so worried about censoring myself, right? Like, I can't say that. What if she took it the wrong way? Blah, blah, blah. Like, right. I would have this whole narrative in my head of what could happen. And so now I always say, if I can get off stage and go, what did I, what did I say up there?
Right,
Was
right.
it
Was
good?
it good?
That's
And
usually
you
when
peek, you're
everybody's
like,
like,
well, they're
oh
still
my,
sitting,
yeah.
so
Everybody's like, usually I'm like, wow, and I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to say go up with a, no plan of action. But it was interesting, like you said, of just not like take the curation out of your head. And all of a sudden that person, that inner knowing, like you had said, I love that inner knowing of that one that just has the answers, that just says it is confident, is in there kind of going, I got something to say.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's usually the right thing because the good thing about that part within you is it's not selfish, but
Hmm.
it is connected, right? So I find myself being like, oh, I don't want to tell that story I was going to tell. I want to tell this other story right now that doesn't make sense, but I'm rolling with it. And inevitably, that's the time that someone comes up to me afterwards. Oh, I'm so glad that you, because I relate so much. They're in tears. Usually they're hugging me because that part of you knows what the people need in the room. And that's what makes you a good speaker when you can connect. I don't know what you need. Like, I don't even know it. Like, most likely, you can't even pronounce my name properly, right? So, how am I as a human going to be able to recognize that in a sea of 1,000 people, right? Or it doesn't even say the room has 1,000, say the room has 20, it doesn't really matter. How am I going to know? But that part of you does know. But you have to give it a container, right? We're not talking about like going up willy nilly. So I use a lot of storytelling structure and there's framework, but my slides have very little on them. One, because it's just good slide practice. And two, so that I have the fun when I'm on that stage. So you give yourself the structure. I don't need you to go away from this podcast and be like, Aleya just told me to get on the microphone and get on the stage. Aleya did not tell you that. So don't blame me for when that doesn't work out for you. But what I am telling you to do is to get out of your own way and be surprised at what might happen.
Well, and I think this is good because I think a lot of people, we hear it all the time that, you need to be more authentic when you're speaking and when you're talking. And like I was saying to you before we started the show, when we were kind of reaching out to our audience, one of the questions we got is, but like how authentic? Because sometimes I have stories that like make people's eyes go like 5 times
Mm-hmm.
as big. And so I love what you said about like making sure that you still create a container for yourself that you're like, okay, like don't
Yes.
scare them.
Don't. Well, I think that the better way for me to say that would be don't scare yourself. You can scare them plenty, actually. I think I rather enjoy it. Um, don't tell a story that you are not ready to tell. So,
I love
one
that.
of my largest, biggest, and grandest pet peeves of speakers is speakers who get on stage and cry. Now, it's totally different if someone in the audience says something or they're telling a story, it's a smaller room and you're reacting to their story and you're crying. That's totally fine. But if you are on stage crying at your own story that you maybe didn't rehearse, but you should have like planned out the points, you kind of know the story and you plan to tell it most likely that day, you shouldn't be crying on stage. You being on stage is not your excuse for a large group therapy session.
Mm.
And most speakers get it wrong and they think that, well, because they're the one in the spotlight with the cute dress and the heels and the all eyes on them, that the experience is about you. And it's not. You just happen to be the expert at that moment. Everybody in that room is an expert in something. You just happen to be the one on the stage leading this group experience for about 60 minutes. right? Your job is to be of service to the audience at the time. And the best way to do that is to tell stories that you can tell eloquently and grab them emotionally and hook them into a concept. That's the purpose of telling a story. I also want to articulate the difference between authenticity and like just trauma dumping. So for me, authenticity is when you're getting into that core part of yourself, that radically authentic self that I was talking about earlier, shining that light that is pure and true. And the work on doing that starts way before you ever get on stage.
Right.
However, trauma dumping, feel like I'm so authentic. I don't feel like doing this today. I don't feel like I'm going to show up looking slovenly, or I'm going to cuss up a storm, or I'm going to call people names. That's how I feel today. That is not authentic. That's just mean or lazy or whatever. Like you can call it whatever you want to, but that's not authentic. That's your hurt coming out. And hurt comes out and looks a lot of different ways. It looks like mean, it looks like sad, it looks like apathy, it looks like extreme nervousness, right? Trauma, hurt, that is not what we're talking about when we're talking about authenticity. I'm not saying you have to get rid of all your trauma before you get on stage, because if that was the case, ain't nobody that would be on a stage, including myself.
Nobody would be talking.
Nobody would be talking. Nobody would be talking. But like there are stories that I have healed from that I could tell now that I wouldn't have been able to tell 10 years ago. Like, for example, I just produced my first ever speaking event. I'm so excited about it. I was very proud of myself. It's for this organization called Speak, which is kind of like TEDx, but more storytelling. And there are 10 speakers. And it was me as one of them, obviously, because I'm a produce an event. I'm going to speak an event as
Absolutely.
well.
As you should.
Obviously.
100%.
Obviously. Thank you so much. And my talk was about me overcoming my daddy issues. And it was about this time when I was in an ayahuasca ceremony. And it was like the moment when I like began my forgiveness journey for my father. And I told that story from the stage. No tears. It was powerful. I mean, people in the audience cried. I didn't cry. I wouldn't have been able to get through the first line of that story 10 years ago. Right?
Yeah.
So recognize where you're at and what needs to be told and what doesn't. And then also, a story is only valuable if it's taught you something. The lesson is why you're telling that crisis story in the first place. So if you are able to say, I have this presentation and I want to tell 3 stories that articulate these 3 types of lessons. They can be about pretty much anything, as long as they have that through line of the lessons that relate to the grander controlling idea of the presentation. If there's no lesson and you're just kind of talking and make yourself look cool, there's no point. There's no point.
Yeah. And I find that's such a key point, because oftentimes I've, watched people on stage and they tell a story, but you can tell they haven't healed or haven't learned the lesson, or they're trying to make everybody learn the same lesson. And I'm like, but that's not what I took from that. So like, I have come to realize that, I always think of it back to like my childhood, right? Like my brother and I will have conversations and I'm like, we were raised in the same house, right? Like, totally different perspectives of how it happened. But I thought, I want to be able to tell a story and have everybody take it differently. Like that some might learn my lesson, but you take what you need at that moment from that story. Because I've heard people speak and have the same speech. That's a whole other thing. But I've heard them 5 years ago, and then I've heard them again, and I thought, oh, that's not what I got the last time I heard them say this. Right?
Because you were in a different place.
I'm at a different spot. So keeping that in mind. But I love that you said, like, make sure that you can tell the story, almost without, I don't want to say without emotion, but that you're not still trying to learn a lesson from it. Like
the story needs to be complete. At least that chapter of it. If you're going to tell that chapter of that story, it needs to be complete. You cannot tell a story from stage that's still in progress, because then the narcissists with short attention spans, who are audience members, aren't going to want to listen to the rest of it, because you're not going to be able to make it about them. And again, that's the whole point of you being on stage, is to make the experience about them. going to make it about them 5 minutes from now and 5 seconds from now and right now as well. So if you can make it about them with the lesson that you have and trying to tie it back to the overall point of the presentation, you got them. But if you're still in the middle of it, they're going to be sitting there like, wait, why did you just tell me that? And they'll be confused. Even if it was a juicy story, they're going to stay and linger and be confused and won't be able to follow the rest of the presentation. And that's when the 50 other things that are much more interesting than you, including the dirt underneath their fingernails, becomes the only thing that they can think about because you lost them.
Right. So if somebody is doing, I want to go back because I want to reiterate one thing, and it just popped into my head again that I was like, Lord, say this again. When you were like simple slides. Because I'm telling you, if somebody's up there and they read their slide, nothing pisses me off more. Like, you should send me an email. I know how to read. So I
Yes.
just want to reiterate that point that you made about that. But let's talk about somebody who's going on stage, maybe for like, a 30-minute, 60-minute presentation. When you're that long, is there sort of like like an amount of stories that are good to tell, or does it always sort of depend on the topic that you're talking on?
So I am not above a shameless plug. So get ready. What's happening right now? In my book, Spark the Stage, which is available on Amazon and anywhere books are sold, I give my Radical Spark signature talk framework. And so in that framework, I specifically tell you to tell 3 stories that are connected to a controlling idea. And I give parts of the framework where it's called STEAM, STEAM. It's an acronym. I did not have an acronym that I thought was going to make a word. So I was very excited when it made a word. It's
I
the
love
little
the
things
word
in life.
too. I just have to say it fits with the topic. So you couldn't have
I'm
picked a better
just,
one.
I'm just saying, just saying. So you're going to steam your presentation 3 times. Tell a story. Tell the teaching. You're going to engage, have an action, and then reiterate the main idea. STEAM. So the story that you're going to tell, each one would be different, or it could be 3 parts of a singular story, but it all relates to the point of what you're talking about. And then you're going to teach on that topic. So if I tell a story about my postpartum depression and how it, taught me about good storytelling on the internet, which is one of the things that it did. I know, weird connection. I'll tell you that story later. I would be like, okay, and then these are the things that it taught me in the teaching section. It taught me A, B, C, D, E, F, and maybe here's some data around it, here's a framework or whatever. Then I'll have an in-room engagement, the E. This is not where there's dead space on stage. This is where you get people to do something, raise their hand, repeat after me, chant, visualize. One side of the room talks to the other side of the room. It's so that your presentation doesn't become you as a talking head talking at the audience and they get to engage back with you. And then you have an action. So you're giving homework. I don't know if this is just me, but I love going to a presentation feeling like I actually am going to go do something now. I didn't just waste my time. You were like, I couldn't read. For me, my definition of a speaker is a performance artist first. If you were just reading me a blog post, I could have stayed in my pajamas for that. I did not need to put pants on for this.
I have to steal
So
that line. Make sure they have to put pants on. Make sure it was worth putting pants on for. I
make
love
sure it
that.
was
I love
worth
that.
putting pants on. And so if you think of yourselves as a performance artist first, you're giving them an engaging thing, and then they're going to be inspired to take action. They're wanting you to tell them what to do. So do that. It could be a journal prompt. It could be, during that speaking engagement that I told you I produced, there was this one lady, and these stories were short. They were between 6 and 8 minutes. And she had this harrowing story about her aunt who had set herself on fire after being sold into a brothel as a child. It was like,
Oh my Lord.
just very powerful, not a dry eye, right? But the whole thing was that she was sold into the brothel because her family needed money. She set herself on fire because of John promised to give her money and take care of her, and he didn't, and all this other stuff happened. And her name, or her fake name, was Alice. And her action at the end of her talk was, now I want you to go and set up an Alice fund so that no matter what happens in your life, you never have to feel like you have to stay in a bad situation or put yourself into a bad situation because of money. You will have an Alice fund, right? That was one of the best calls to action I've ever had
Oh
because
my
I've
God,
ever
I'm like,
seen.
fire fund.
Right.
right
Like
away.
you're like,
Yeah.
forget
Yeah.
it. Like I feel like everybody's on their phone setting up a separate Wells Fargo account, right?
I don't want to set myself on fire.
The feeling that you want to give people that they are compelled to take that next action. That's what the A in STEAM is. And then M is the main idea. The main idea of that section and how it relates to the overall main idea of your presentation. The reason why you're doing this is because people want to listen to you, but they also don't. It
Yeah.
actually doesn't even matter like if your presentation 1 of 4 before lunch or your presentation 4 of 4 before lunch. They signed up to be at the conference. Somebody paid for them to be there. There's snacks. It's cool, but they still kind of don't really want to pay attention. In every presentation, they're like, so how much longer is this? How much? And if you're saying, I have 3 sections, and so at the end of this section, this is the main idea, this is how it relates to it. And now we're moving on to section 2 of 3, basically. You're mile marking for them so that they know exactly how much willpower they need to exert to not tuck the dirt under their fingernails if they can just by gum help themselves. So reiterating the main idea gets them solidified with the points within your presentation so that they know what they should be downloading and taking away. It also allows everyone who's an audience member who's, yes, I know I keep bad mouthing them, but you, dear listener, and me and you, Tanya, we are all like this as audience members too. We're narcissists with short attention spans and also like toddlers, which I think are actually the same thing. Being someone that has a toddler, that was like, well, it's not too different. That you're literally like the distractions and the attention span are just, it's not even possible for you to pay attention for very long, even if you put your big girl pants on that day.
Yeah.
So just recognize that with the way that you set up your stories.
Yeah. And I think it's so true because I don't know, it doesn't matter how many audiences I sit in. I'm always like, how does this pertain to me? Like, it's my first thought, right? It's that narcissism. Can I, how can I use
Exactly.
this to benefit myself? So, I mean, that's the whole reason why we go anywhere. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's why we go anywhere. That's why anybody's listening to anything.
So I want to move into the book. So I want to talk a little bit about what made you decide to want to write this and what was that being an author myself. I love hearing the process of how did you decide, okay, I'm going to write a book on this?
So what I'm supposed to tell you.
No, I want what the real reason.
Is you hear those people, I just had a book in me, Tanya, and it just had to come out. That is not what happened. So I wanted a way for more people to find out about me and to find my course and to book me to speak and to buy my course. That was why I wrote this book.
Thank you for actually being honest about that, because I know you're supposed to say the thing of like blah blah blah. Like, yes, I always wanted to like write a book when I was younger, but not a business book. That way, like it wasn't. It was about like a cat or like some fantasy thing. Like it wasn't really about that. And same thing, I realized that I could like up tens of thousands of dollars if I could put author at the end of my name. So I was like, I'm teaching this already.
Raises my speaking prices. It allows me to reach a new audience. It's a great lead magnet. Like,
yeah.
And I already had the course. The course came first, sparked the stage, and then I wrote the book based on the course. And then the book, I revised a lot of things in the course after I wrote the book. And it is soup to nuts on how to be a speaker, but not how to be a cookie cutter speaker. That was my thing. I also got super tired of sitting through boring presentations.
Mm-hmm.
And I also felt a lot of empathy for the people that were giving said boring presentations because they were boring people. Like it wasn't like I was at like some whatever dry conference RS every single time. Like it was just people that just didn't know how to be good speakers
Yeah.
or
Engaging or enthrall. Yeah.
engaging. Yeah, or it was the opposite
To
where it was
me,
just
it's the
like,
monotone one. Today we are going to talk about this topic. Look, we need
it's a
I
problem.
actually went to one conference, just as like a side note. It was the most brilliant thing I'd ever seen in my life. It was all like new speakers. It was like talk about throwing people into a fire. But everybody had like a Nerf gun on their table in front of them.
Uh-huh.
And if
Wait, like the
somebody like,
audience members?
yeah.
Oh, this is awesome.
And so it was said to be like everybody knew why they were there. And it was people practicing learning like how to speak with an
Learning how
audience
to
and all that
speak.
up, right? Like it wasn't just like so everybody like knew the context behind it. But if somebody was dry or just reading slides, you were allowed below the neck to shoot them. It was the most fun. And I will have to say, the
Did people get shot?
yes.
Oh,
And it was the one guy who was monotone. But the good thing was about this, I will, because people are like, I would never stand up on stage. He handled it so well because he would stop and go, okay, tell me why. And they're like, you are
oh,
so
that's
dry.
really
Like you
good.
have no inflection in your voice. And he's like, okay. And then he would like continue on and then he put the inflection in. So it was really like a learning experience from
Okay,
other
he's
speakers who
my
were in a room.
favorite human
It
because
was
most people
so
don't do
yeah.
that. That's
Oh, by the end,
awesome.
it was great. Like he had ebbs and flows, and it was like he wasn't talking very robotic. And he was like, I learned the most from that. But of course, it also got I realized afterwards in like looking back on it, I'm like, it was such a way to get people engaged because all you hear was, and then you'd hear, and it would like land on the stage, right? And everybody would start laughing. And I was like, it was such an easy break because as soon as one person laughed, another person would laugh, then the person on stage
Yeah,
would
yeah,
laugh and
yeah.
be like, touche, touche. Okay, where did I go wrong? Right? Like it was really funny, but I was like,
That is
oh
an
God,
awesome concept.
right? It was a lot of
I
fun to be a
thoroughly
part of the
enjoy that.
audience. I don't know what it was like to be on stage, but it was a lot of fun to be a
I don't
part
know if
of
I'd
the
want to be on
audience.
stage. I don't, well, I probably would learn a
I
lot. I
probably
would
would
definitely learn
go
a
because
lot.
you'd learn like you're like I
You'd
get what
learn.
people get and I get what people don't get, right? And then it was
Yeah.
and the preface too was you were not allowed to shoot a dart if you weren't willing to speak to that dart. So that was like the instructions we
Yeah,
got at
but
the
you couldn't
beginning.
just randomly
So you
mow
couldn't
people
do it and be
down.
like, nope, like I'm not going to say anything or whatever. Like you had to go, I'm going to have, if I have enough guts, what did she say at the beginning? If you have enough guts to shoot the dart, you have to explain the bullet, was what she said.
Oh, that's good.
So I thought that was really neat because I was like, oh, I wonder how many people in the audience were like, I don't want to have to stand up and say something. So you had
I
to be
know, because
bold
you're like,
enough
because
to,
I'm literally now I have to stand up and say something
I have to stand
against
behind
someone
this
who's just
point that
saying
I'm going to
something.
make. So is it, so I think there was a lot of people that kind of took a second thought and go, am I being too critical on this? It was a really interesting kind of concept,
Mm,
but yeah. So
I
every time
have
I think,
never heard about that. That sounds like a lot of.
yeah, it was like, it was a good way to learn how to speak, let me tell you.
Yeah, they're not going to make those mistakes again.
So we know where everybody can find the book, but I think like most things when you kind of write a book, it's more like and you correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of becomes like a DIY version of what you actually do. So let's talk about what you actually do. So we're going to drive people to go and, experience you through the book. But if I know there's going to be a lot who are like, read it, understood it, know how to read words, but what is it like to work with you? What do they get more out of that?
I mean, there's unicorns, rainbows, bubblegum. I mean, it's a magical, majestic experience. Tanya. But really, so the book, and it even says this in the book. If you've read this book and you really just want to know if you're doing it right or not, go buy the course. So that's the main purpose of the course. The course will give you videos that are basically very similar to what's in the book, but it gives you the community of other speakers that have gone through the course so that you get to communicate, fellowship, pros and cons, and then you get access to me. And I give you all kinds of access. I don't really limit what I will do to help people get on stage, because the sad fact is most people spend thousands of dollars on courses they never finish and they never do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's heartbreaking as a course creator to see that, because I don't know, maybe my expectations are off, but I'm like, oh man, I really wanted you to do the thing, and like to come to the speaking engagement and be like, oh my God, proud mama bear, like that's my student on stage. Like I want you to do the thing. So I genuinely help you. I've helped people do everything from rearrange slides to move bullet points to talk them off the ledge when they feel like they don't have a story to tell. Right. So that is the beauty of working with me. And I also know what I'm doing. I know that that's like, if Tanya told you that I knew what I was doing, you'd believe her, but you're not going to believe me when I tell you I know what I'm doing. But I promise I do, right? That's how just how social proof works. So check out the website aleyaharris.com/spark, and you can see some testimonials. But more importantly, like I would encourage you to reach out to me and ask me for the email addresses of people if you're really curious, because they can tell you even more what it's like to go from I don't feel confident, I don't think I have a story to tell, but I really want to get on stage, to oh yeah, I think that I can charge $10,000 for that. You'll notice in the book and in the course, I don't actually talk about goal setting and money until the very end. And one of my students, Jennifer, I remember she asked me, well, this seems like it's out of place. Why didn't we do this in the beginning? I said, well, because in the beginning, you didn't even think you belonged here. And you would have said that your speaking rate was $3.99 and maybe $20 if you could swing it. And now you're over here making your six-figure speaking budget or forecast out because you think that you can land a bunch of these other ones. And I've told you exactly how. So it's the confidence that you get from working with me one-on-one. And again, whether it was chefing or whether it was marketing or anything in between, I've always just had the job be the tool or the excuse to love people into the higher versions of themselves. And this is more of the same version of that. You'll probably get a lot more than you bargained for.
But I think a lot of people need that. And I know a lot of my listeners, in just us having conversations together, and me just kind of going, what makes you keep coming back? And they're like, I like being surprised at the shit that you say and the way you word stuff that doesn't make any sense, right? And so we did this like fun little thing where I was like, send me like the weirdest thing I've ever said that like meant something to you. And the stuff that we got back, I was like, yeah, I do say a lot of weird stuff when I connect things together, right? Like one girl's like, I don't remember what you said, but you said like a squirrel can climb up a tree, but it like can't jump across the street. And I was like, what?
What?
And she's like, it was so meaningful. And I was like,
You
okay.
know what? Who am I to take that away from you? Go on with your squirrel and its tree
It's
in the
one of
street.
those things that I'm like, yeah, sometimes I will relate things together, but I'm like, I don't know. So yeah, I think people need that. They need somebody to draw them out. And I think what I love the most about it, just like in deep diving your stuff and on your site and everything, is the fact that you almost give permission to people to start realizing that we all have stories, because it is literally impossible to be where you are right now. Whoever is listening, wherever you are right now, it is impossible that you got there without a story.
Absolutely. Without many, many, many
Many
stories.
stories, yeah.
And they don't have to be like another bone I have to pick with the speaking industry is that the quadriplegic Navy SEAL who trains dogs on the weekends and runs into buildings to save babies will always get on stage first. It's
Right.
just
It's just,
is what
yeah,
it is,
I know.
right? That's a huge, big, traumatizing story.
Hmm.
That person does not need to read my book or take my
Yeah.
course, right? They
But
don't
I think
need
that's worry of a lot of people, because they go like, right, I wasn't in the Navy, I'm not a veteran, I didn't overcome cancer, I
yep.
didn't lose a baby, I didn't like Nobody
Because
like
my story,
a
nobody
bunch of
needs to
stuff
hear the
didn't
story.
die. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just kind of a normal person. Yeah, maybe I went through a divorce, or maybe I did this or that. It doesn't matter. Your story is your story, and someone not only needs to hear it, but they need to hear it from you, and they are waiting for you. They are waiting for you to tell their story, and they don't even know it yet. There will be the right place at the right time, and in that audience, there will be the person that for years has been struggling with something, but because you said it out of your mouth in your way with your story, it was exactly what they needed in that moment. When I tell my story about daddy issues, like I was talking about, you know how many people in this country got some daddy issues? I mean, it is not a rare thing. Like throw
No.
a stone, hit a girl with some daddy issues, right? It's not something that really would make me stand out. But I spoke for 7 minutes and the whole audience was in tears.
Mm-hmm.
Is it because I'm a good speaker? You better butt your buttons that I'm a good speaker. Was it because it was such a ridiculously crazy story? No, not
Yeah.
really. I just know how to tell it. I know the story structure. I know how to put the framing in it. Any story can be a good story. Another one of my students who was on stage told a story about falling off of her bike and how the scar on her lip maimed her for life, and now she changed her life and became this woman who lives this life of a possibilitarian and all of this. The story was about falling off your bike.
Right.
I mean,
At the
I've done
crest
that.
of it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
concept, it's a story about falling off your bike. So don't be afraid to step into the power of your story, even if your story is not something ridiculous
Right.
and life what you think is life changing, because every moment, every breath is life changing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be traumatic.
Well, and I love that because I think it opens it up for people to realize that the lesson is the big thing, right? The story can be something small or seemingly insignificant if told with no lesson, right? Just falling off your
Mm-hmm.
bike and cutting your lip open is a small story that you're like, "Oh, okay, great. Good for you." But it's
Yeah.
the lesson that's the difference. What did you learn from that? How did that make you feel? So I think that gives comfort to people because I think oftentimes, yeah, we get stuck in the, well, I didn't have anything monumental happen to me or happen to somebody beside me, or, like I had one girl's like, do I have to kill my husband to get a speaking career? Like, I'll do it. And he's like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah. He's like, is there another option?
Yeah.
I prefer to explore all of our options
I buy
before
you
we got
Aleya's book.
there.
Please don't kill me. You're going to take her course. She's going to.
That's it. I'm saving lives over here. I'm saving lives,
So
Tanya.
there you go. If
Saving
anybody
lives.
wants to gift somebody something, this is the gift of life.
Yeah. And that's why, that's the real reason I wrote the book. That's the real reason. That's it. I don't know why I didn't say that in the beginning.
Save people's lives from this. So we've got the book, we've got the course. What else do you have coming up? Let's get some more shameless plugs here before we
Shameless
sadly
plug.
say goodbye.
I know. I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. Well, the bread and butter of my consulting is I'm a strategic storytelling consultant. So I work with private equity companies, venture capitals companies, and um, any really small to medium sized business who is looking to articulate their worth. I've taken companies that have been at a $2 million valuation and got them $51 million valuations just based on the story that we're telling. Stories are super powerful. So that's the main thing that I do on the consulting side. So if you are a small to medium sized business and you're looking for better stories and better differentiation, you can check that out at evolutioncollective.com, which is my consulting business. Other than that, my book, my course, and booking me as a speaker, that's where I'm at. You can do all of those things at aleyaharris.com. That is ALEYAHARRIS.com.
I love that. And I love the inflection of that. It was so like radio show host.
You're well. Oh, I should have put more of my podcast voice on for this, because as we're talking about, you should hear me. It's great.
Oh, I love it. This has been so much fun. I don't even want to say goodbye, but we're going to make sure we have all of the links of where you can find this to get started, the book to get
Yes.
started. I want to reiterate again, it's just to get you started.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
all of the links where you get to continue on. Because I think stories are the way that we connect. They're the way that we share. They're the way that we learn, and they're the way that we get over things. So I think they're so powerful. And I was so glad that you're here to help us and the audience understand that more. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much to Aleya. Oh, isn't she just an infectious personality? Like, I just feel so like my heart is racing, like my cheeks are sore from smiling so much. I just feel so inspired and invigorated by her. I absolutely adore being around people like her, which is why I wanted to bring her on the show. And I hope you are experiencing the same thing after this episode. So, your homework, my Foxy listener, is to think about a story that you have. What is a story that you have, something that you learned a valuable lesson from? I'm not saying you need to share it or go speak it on a stage, but I just want you to find it. I want you to get back in touch with remembering those things that then might have been tough, but now become inspiration. Those are the things that we need to remind ourselves of. And this is a fantastic exercise to start doing that. So, if you feel so inclined, I would love you to share your story with me. I always find so much inspiration from you guys. So feel free to send it in an email, in a voice note, in smoke signals. It doesn't matter. However you want to get it to me, I will sit and read it because stories are what connect us together. And I absolutely love storytelling and I absolutely love listening to stories. So I'm encouraging you to do this homework, and I'm encouraging you to also share the homework with somebody else. And as I always say, no matter what it is that you decide to do, make sure that you take time to have fun. Because if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?